with the knowledge. If you would like to be in the drawing for our door prizes, we have several gift bags for our parents with different children at different grade levels. So if you have a child or even more than one child at one of our schools and you need some extra resources to use at home, please send me an email with your child's name, their school, their teacher, and what grade they're in, maybe what area they may be struggling in. Because I have several things that are in for different subject areas as well. And I'm really happy that you guys are here. We are excited to collaborate with the Family Network on Disabilities. They have been amazing, and we are so appreciative of their time and resources. Thank you, Glenesha.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura. It has been really awesome collaborating with Santa Rosa County. So I've been with the company for almost 2 years, and I'm now branching out to the different counties that I have been assigned. So I'm super glad that you all are here with me. I'm going to have you all muted for the presentation. And then once I finish up the presentation, I will unmute you and then you can ask questions, we can converse. But also, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat and I'll go back through, or you can write it down and you can ask it afterwards. So let me get myself prepared and ready. So I'm going to be recording this presentation as well. So if maybe you have a loved one or a friend who didn't get the chance to come, then they can watch the recording. But also you can let them know that we have an event this evening at 5 o'clock where I will be presenting again. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm glad you're here with me. And as I said, we are Family Network on Disabilities Poppin'. And I am a parent training coordinator, and I actually cover 9 areas in Northwest Florida. So, Family Network on Disabilities covers the entire state of Florida, but I'm in the Northwest part with my manager, Miss Kathy, who lives in Jacksonville, and then my other two coworkers, Sassafras and Josefina, who are in Tallahassee and the Ocala area. I have 9 counties from Escambia County all the way over to Washington, Calhoun, Jackson County, and then I live in Bay County. And I am a former music teacher at Warrenton Elementary, that is in Escambia County. I taught there from 2008 to 2013. And then the year before that, in 2007, I was an ESE para and then bookends. In order for me to get vetted into the Escambia County retirement, I had to do one more year. And so I was a paraprofessional again from 2014 to 2015. And then since then, I've been in private education and I've gotten a chance to teach several different subjects. I've taught ESOL, I taught reading, I had my own private nanny business. And then in the last few years, I have been involved in the medical field as a phlebotomist. And I recently started teaching phlebotomy a few years ago. So I have been very blessed to be across the field of education and then also join this wonderful agency as a parent training coordinator. So this is a completely different side of special education that I had previously been used to. So I'm learning a lot of new things, but I love being with this agency and I hope that you will fall in love with our agency the way that I have fell in love. I do not have children of my own. But as I said, I've taught ESC and I live with a disability myself. I have a physical disability. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and it's on the severe side. It's very painful and disease to deal with. However, I am a believer and a Christian, and God's grace is sufficient, and I am dealing with it. But it gives me the compassion that I need to work with my families like you all. And then my brother lives with bipolar disorder, and it's been a very difficult season with us having to be supportive of him and his bipolar disorder is untreated, so it makes it hard. So I have some compassion for you all. I don't know exactly what your journey is, but I do know some of what you're dealing with, and so I'm definitely here to support you and to help you. So before we get into our presentation, though, I want to share about Family Network on Disabilities. I wish I had known about FND when my brother was in school in the late 1990s. We could have gotten him the help he needed. And then also when I was a teacher and I was teaching my students, although I taught music, I did have special needs students in my classes. We tried to make sure that we included them and did as much inclusion as possible. But I feel like if we had known about this agency, it could have been more beneficial in my career and within my family, but that's okay. We're glad that we know who F&D is now, and part of my job is getting all the information out to families who have not heard of us. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We don't work for our local, state, or federal agencies or schools. We're funded in part by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health, and we're a free service because of our grant. Awesome news is that we just got approved for our grant for another 5 years. So I get to keep my job. Super excited about that because I was the last one hired. But also, too, we get to continue to help families because of this grant for the next 5 years. We are the statewide Parent Training Information Center, known as the PTI, and the statewide Family to Family Health Information Center. Now, maybe you haven't heard of a PTI. In all of my 18 years of education, I had not heard of the PTI before. And we have PTIs around the nation, all over the United States. And depending on your state size, is how many you may have. So in Florida, we have three. And I'll talk more in depth about those a little bit later. But I said we were F&D Poppin. So Poppin is parents offering parents information and networking. We're in North Florida. And then we have PEN, which is Parent Support Network. And then, excuse me, that's PSN. PSN is Parent Support Network, and PEN is Parent Education Network, and they're further south. And we'll talk about those at the end. But we are so blessed to be able to cover the entire state of Florida. And then within our different agencies, we have several parent training coordinators like myself. So we like to remind people that we are family driven. We were founded in 1985 by a group of families of children who had disabilities, and then they came together for mutual support. And we support families who have individuals who may be at risk, they have disabilities, or have special needs and their families. And we also serve professionals and concerned citizens. So if you are a parent watching this and maybe you feel like your child's teacher or you have a friend who's in education who has not heard about us, we definitely want to get connected with them as well because we do serve professionals and concerned citizens. The more people know about special education, the better it is going to be for our community. So F&D is unique due to the majority of our board members, management staff, and all field staff have family members who are persons with disabilities. And as I mentioned, I have rheumatoid arthritis. My manager, Ms. Kathy, has two sons. One has autism and the other has ADHD. And then my two coworkers, Ms. Sassafras and Ms. Josefina, both have daughters who are on the spectrum as well. So it's very important that each time I come before you doing a Zoom presentation or in-person presentation or our social media content that I explain what we do and what we don't. So it's important that you understand that we are not attorneys, doctors, or mental health professionals, and the following information I'm going to share is not legal or medical advice. But I like to put in that, however, we do share information, resources, and supports for you and your family. Information is research based to create our trainings, and we always encourage collaboration between our schools and agencies. And I like to do that visual show of collaboration because we want agencies to know that we are coming together with them to collaborate with our parents. We don't ever want our agencies thinking that we are against them. And so that is something that I really push to make sure that people understand that we are working with agencies, we are working with schools, we are working with parents. And so now we're going to move forward and dive into our presentation. And as I said, if you have questions, just hold on to those questions or you can put them in the chat. And when I finish, we will go back and we will have some time of discussion. All right, so let's talk about IDEA. So, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as IDEA, it's a law ensuring services to children with disabilities throughout the nation. IDEA governs how states and public agencies provide early intervention, special education, and related services to eligible infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. So, the key word we want to make sure we know is eligible because a child can have a disability but not be eligible under the law of IDEA. Infants and toddlers with disabilities ages birth to 3 and their families receive early intervention services under IDEA Part C, as in cat, and then children and youth ages 3 to 21 receive special education and related services under IDEA Part B, as in boy. So, how does this connect with the IEP? The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is the nation's federal special education law that ensures public schools serve the educational needs of students with disabilities. IDEA requires that schools provide special education services to eligible students as outlined in the student's individualized education program, or you might hear plan. So those words are both used. While each state differs how they develop an IEP, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires that every IEP include the following: how the student is currently performing in school, what's going on right now in the present moment, how the student can achieve educational goals in the coming year. So we're planning for the future. And then how the student will participate in the general education curriculum, wanting to make sure that we keep our child in the least restrictive environment as possible. So there are six principles of IDEA, and you can see these here on the screen. So we have first, free and appropriate education. This is known as FAPE. And in the world of special education, there are so many different acronyms, and we have a wonderful brochure called Alphabet Soup that I can get to you digitally or hard copy that will include all of these different acronyms. But free appropriate education is what it says. And I'm sorry, I forgot the word public. We're public schools here for the most part. This is the special education and related services that are provided by public expense, that they meet standards and are appropriate and provide in conformity with the IEP. And then we have, of course, our IEP, what we're here to discuss today. This is a criteria that we have under IDEA for special education services. The IEP team comes together to develop the IEP. And then we have our parent and student participation. It's required and expected that parents and children play a role in the development and implementation of the IEP. And then appropriate evaluation. This is to determine whether a child is a child with disability as defined in section 1414. And at the beginning of the presentation, I said that keyword was eligible. And then we have to find that eligibility within 60 days of receiving parental consent for the evaluation, or if the state establishes a time frame within the evaluation must be conducted within such time frame and to determine the educational needs of the child. All of these pillars are important, or six principles are important, but definitely the appropriate evaluation is going to be one of the key areas. And then LRE, known as least restrictive environment. This means that the schools are required to educate children with disabilities, the children who are not disabled, to the maximum extent possible. So, an example is when students of mine would come from their ESE classes to my music class, which we would have inclusion. So I would have an ESE class and then I would have a mainstream class, and they would usually in the same grade or one grade off, maybe fourth and fifth grade, and they'd come to music or they'd go to art or they go to PE. And then we have our procedural safeguards. These are a set of regulated guidelines designed to protect the rights of parents and their children with a disability, and at the same time, give families and school systems several mechanisms to which to solve their disputes. The procedural safeguards is disseminated annually. So each year you should get a copy of the procedural safeguards, and you are welcome to request this. So the procedural safeguards are very important. We want you to understand that they are not your ammo book. Okay, I've got these procedural safeguards. This is what you have to do. These are safeguards to protect your rights, the parents and rights of the children, but they are to help you work together with the school to be able to get what your child needs. And throughout this presentation, I just want us to remember that we have a child or maybe multiple children in your family who are in the middle. The child is supposed to be our greatest goal and the one that we want to serve. So if we think about that, when we come together with the IEP team, it's easier for us to work together and not against each other because there will be conflict at times. But you want to make sure that our common goal is making sure we're doing the best for this child. And so we can work more closely as a team when we keep this in mind. So let's talk about what the IEP is. So the IEP is a written statement for each child with a disability that is developed, reviewed, and revised in accordance with Section 6 614D. So you may hear me talk about sections and numbers and letters throughout the presentation. I don't want you to get bogged down with what this law says and the rigidness of it because I have information that can help you understand the law in a more legible layman's way and that you can kind of read it just like a pamphlet or a book. But there is law that has to be followed, but we want to make sure that we understand it in a way that is manageable for us. So this quote is taken from the definition section of IDEA 2004. Notice that the law requires the program to be in a written format, and it also makes reference to the Section 614 of the Act. Why is Section 614 of the Act important to know? Because IDEA is a procedural law. It lays out 8 specific topic areas that must be discussed, agreed upon, and documented. And we will be discussing these in the workshop. So let's start with our IEP team. I mentioned at the beginning there is a team, and you all get to be a part of it. So the parents, you all are expected that you will be a part of the IEP team and attend all meetings if possible. Although parents must be invited by the school, if they choose not to attend, the meeting may be held without them. And this is key importance to remember. All efforts should be made by the school to provide parents with the opportunity to attend the meeting. This can be through conference calls, meetings at alternate times, etc. And then, of course, our students, our loved ones, our babies. Parents may bring their children at any age to an IEP meeting so as long as they feel appropriate. There are move transition IEP meetings in which the child must be invited, and that as age 12 to 14 and seventh grade, or whichever comes first. And then again, it is based on your child's ability to be present at the IEP meeting. And that is when you're discussing the transition process and maybe some post-secondary goals and plans. And so we have our parents and our student, and then we have our ESE teacher, of course, is going to be there because outside of the parents, they probably know the child best. And then you may have your general or regular education teacher if the student is in a comprehensive setting. So, as a special education teacher, I did not have to attend ESE meetings. The students were with me for about 30 minutes a week, maybe an hour in their special area class, but I did get updates and information. But let's say your child goes to class in general ed for English or math. That teacher would come to the IEP meeting. And then we have our local education agency known as our LEA. They may be there. Then we may have a school system representative. This is the individual that represents the school district and is authorized to make decisions on approving services. Maybe you need an interpreter for the evaluation, someone who can interpret evaluation or assessment results. And this is very important because sometimes assessment results can be difficult to understand. And if they weren't the assessment result that you were hoping for, it could be emotional, which can in turn make a conflict with us understanding what we're seeing on the paper. And then a language interpreter. We have many people who are living here in the United States who are not from the United States, and English is not their first language. And also, we may have to have an interpreter for those who are blind or deaf. And then others, anyone working with a child that can provide information on their respective area of expertise, such as a therapist, service providers, move transition specialists, or agency representatives. So you all come together as a team. One thing that I do need to share with us at Family Network on Disabilities, we are parent training coordinators. Unfortunately, I cannot attend an IEP meeting with you, but I can help prepare you for it and give you all the resources and information that you need. And remember, I'm not practicing medicine, I'm not practicing law. I have to give you the information, and my job is to explain it. And I can let you know what your rights and your responsibilities are. But as we are working in F&D, we give that individualized assistance and we can help you find an advocate if you need someone to attend that meeting with you. So now let's talk about response to intervention and the multi-tiered system of support. In 2004, a change in educational thinking brought us response to RTI. This is a framework that many schools use to help students who are struggling with academics. Language related to RTI was written into the law within the 2004 reauthorization of IDEA. So, RTI is a three-tiered educational approach aimed at early identification and support of students whose learning needs are not being met. And the key word here is early identification. This is so important. If we can get early identification and we can work with a child at the earliest age possible to get them the resources they need. So the data collected during tiers one, two, and three are included and used to make the eligibility decision. Interventions are matched to student need, monitoring progress frequently to make decisions about changes in instruction or goals. So I hope you're understanding that, as I mentioned, that the process of the IDEA is procedural. We are constantly making changes, constantly trying to tweak things to make it better for the student. And so that's going to require flexibility. Then the umbrella of the multi-tiered system of support is more comprehensive. We go into more detail. It may include the three levels of RTI, but MTSS goes just beyond academics. It also covers social and emotional supports. That means it can include behavior intervention plans. MTSS covers the adults at school too. And it also includes things like professional development and focuses on creating ways for them to team up to help struggling students. I really like how the NTSS includes the behavior intervention plans. As I shared with you, my brother is living with bipolar disorder. If we had known about his disability back when he was in high school, he likely would have had an IEP because his disability was affecting his education and him getting the proper education. And his behavior was a main problem within the classroom. So, moving on from that, we want to talk about the process of special education. So, there are seven key steps, as you can see here on the screen. We have our referral, our pre referral, identification, eligibility, IEP development, implementation, review, and evaluation. So, these steps can move very quickly. And so, that's why it's important that you are knowledgeable of each step. So let's talk about the first one, pre-referral. Before referring a child for special education, schools try different strategies in the general education classroom. So if your student is struggling with an area, the teacher notices something, or maybe you notice something, and there's mention, I think they might need some ESE services. Well, before we dive into the actual referral, the general ed teacher is going to try some different strategies that they know. They may even try to get some ideas from other ESE teachers to help them because we're trying to not have to go that route. It may be necessary, but we're trying to keep our child in the least restrictive environment as possible. These interventions help determine if challenges can be addressed without special education. Teachers document concerns, try accommodations, and track progress. If difficulties continue, the child moves to the referral stage. Goals of the pre referral: identify and document challenges. Very important. So, if you're a parent watching this now and you feel that your child may have a disability, please start documenting information that you see at home and things that you may know of at school. Teachers may test classroom supports and interventions, and of course, monitor student progress. And so now we go to our step two, referral. If interventions don't work, a referral for special education is made. This is important. It can come from parents, teachers, doctors, or others. Referrals may happen at any age based on the child's needs and behaviors affecting learning. So understand, it doesn't just have to be your child's teacher to make a referral. You can make a formal referral and it will be addressed. Also, if your child's doctor sees something, maybe at a checkup, they can make a referral as well too. And then we move to identification. The school conducts evaluations to determine if the child has a disability requiring special education. A team, often including parents, specialists, and teachers, assess how the child functions at home, in school, and socially. This stage creates a baseline of strengths and needs. So, this is where we're really starting to get into the meat and the identification portion, because as I mentioned, we have to make sure that the child has a disability that requires special education. And then step four, eligibility. Using assessment results, the IEP team decides if the child qualifies for special education. If eligible, the team begins planning services. If not, the child remains in the general classroom with support if needed. And so sometimes a child may not be eligible for an IEP. They might be eligible for a 504 plan, or they may not be eligible for any special education services. And then we may need to go back to step one and do some more documentation and move further from there. IEP development. If eligible, the IEP team, including parents, develops an education plan. The plan outlines goals, services, accommodations, and learning strategies. Parents can bring a support person to the meeting to help advocate for their child. And then implementation. Once the IEP is approved, services can begin. So this is very important to understand. The IEP has to be approved, and then you have to sign that you approve it before your child can receive these services. The child may receive support from therapists, special educators, and others. Accommodations for instruction and testing are also put in place. IEPs can be long, but it's very crucial that we have all of the information included on paper. And then final step, review and evaluation. This is an ongoing process. IEPs are reviewed at least once a year to check the progress. If goals aren't being met, the plan is adjusted. If progress exceeds expectations, new goals may be set. In some cases, the child may transition back into the general education setting, and that is definitely a goal that we want. So for some reason, my slide just went out on me, but I have the information here. I may have to close out and come back, but let's see if it gives it to me. So next we have our 8 components of the IEP. So if you're taking notes and you don't see the slide right now, that is what we have next, our 8 components of the IEP. So we have our present levels of performance, describing the child's current skill level. Then we have statements of measurable annual goals. Then we have explaining how a child's progress will be tracked. Then we have special education services the child will receive, how the children will participate in mainstream classrooms, accommodations and modifications, and the amount of duration the services the children will receive will be, and then statement of move transition. So I really wanted you to see this slide. So I think I'm going to close out my notes for a second and see if I can get us this slide back. So give me just a moment and I'm going to see what we can do. Okay, so we've gotten that. Awesome. Okay, we have got back what we need. Okay, so the 8 parts of the IEP I mentioned. So we have present levels of performance. That's basically where your child is currently performing at the present moment. Every IEP must include a description of the child's skills in all areas of concern and how to explain how the disability affects his progress in the general education curriculum. This is key because this is the reason the child is receiving the ESE services because they're having difficulty progressing in the general education classroom. IEP teams typically use formal assessments to determine the child's functioning and establish a baseline of performance. The team may also use anecdotal information and progress data from the child's classroom teachers to further describe the child's skills. Then we have our statement of annual goals. We have to have statements of these annual goals, and they must be measurable goals. And then how will the child's progress be tracked? An explanation of how the progress towards the goal and objectives will be measured and how that information will be reported to parents. And this can be in a number of ways. Most commonly, we use formal assessment or we may use informal assessment, but there's so many different ways. Then special education services the child will receive. Maybe the child only needs special education services in the area of English and language arts, but they don't need it in mathematics, or maybe they only need it in mathematics and not reading. And so it just depends, and it has to be broken down and in detail the specific area. How the child will participate in the mainstream classroom. Least restricted environment is one of the pillars of the IDEA law and it will ensure that children are educated in the least restrictive environment as possible. The IEP team must consider if and how a child will participate in general education program with children in mainstream classrooms. The IEP must specify the amount of time the child will participate in the mainstream education program and explain the rationale for that decision. Accommodations and modifications. The IEP must explain the types of accommodations and modifications that will be used for the student and why. So it's very important that we understand that there's a key difference in accommodations and a modification. So I like to give the example with my rheumatoid arthritis. I have a physical accommodation. So when I was working as a phlebotomist, you would draw blood standing up. However, because I have the rheumatoid arthritis, it would make it difficult for me to stand up for a long time. So when I had a long blood draw, let's say, for example, a blood culture, I was given the accommodation to sit down when I was had to do that type of blood draw. Other than that, I would stand for my blood draws. A modification would be something completely different. I would still be a phlebotomist, but let's say I didn't go on the floor. So the modification to my work environment is that I couldn't go on the floor drawing blood, but I could work in the lab receiving specimens. And so the thing we want to remember with accommodations and modifications is we want to try as many accommodations as possible because when we do a modification, we're changing the baseline of possibly the curriculum or possibly the degree path the child is going to get. And so we want them to be able to, again, be in that environment, the least restrictive environment, and get the best public, excuse me, best public education as possible. And then the amount and duration the child will receive services. The IEP must include a projected beginning and end date. Sometimes the child does well and they succeed, and there is an end date to the services. So that's something that we hope for as well. But it also needs to include the frequency of the services and where they will be delivered. So this means, are they going to be delivered in the mainstream classroom? Are they going to be delivered in the resource room? Are they going to be delivered at home or in a higher level setting where the child lives and goes to school in this place? And then also the statement of move transition. No later than the child's 16th birthday, an IEP must include measurable goals for the student's anticipated post secondary program and a description of the services needed for the child to reach those goals. At this move transition, I like to share with parents that if you know that your child is going to be in a situation where you need to continue being their guardian after their age of majority, which is age 18 in the state of Florida, you need to go ahead and get information for guardianship because it can be a lengthy process. And you don't want to get to age 17 and a half and you're just trying to apply for guardianship. So it's never too early to start getting that information because you will need it in the future. And so now let's get into more in depth. Present levels of performance, we talked about those are one of the parts of the IEP. So we have these different domains. You may not need all of these domains, but you may need a lot of them. So in domain A, curriculum and learning environment, 100% of the time that's going to be there. Domain B, social and emotional behavior. If your child's disability has some social and emotional behavior components, you're going to have that. Independent functioning, what it says. How much can your child independently function at home and at school? This is going to be daily life, chores, self care, following routines. And then our next domain is going to be healthcare. Your child may not have any healthcare needs, and so that wouldn't be a part of the IEP, but they may. And so when it comes to healthcare at Family Network on Disabilities, we also have our agency that's within us called Family Star, and they focus on providing free resources and services for families who have children with special healthcare needs. And so if you have a situation like that and you wanted to get services from us, I would have you work with me, but I'd also have you connect with our coordinator for that Family Star to get you the resources that you need for healthcare. And then communication is domain E, how your child understands and uses language, including preferred communication methods. And this is very important for our children who might be nonverbal or have a hard time expressing their feelings. Why parent input matters. Parents see things at home that schools may not. Your insights help build a more accurate IEP. So, some tips for sharing your input. Write it down ahead of time. Always prepare. Be specific, strengths, struggles, and priorities. So, for example, let's talk about some strengths your child might be having at home. So your child might be having some trouble getting up in the morning. Well, there has to be a reason behind that because if they have trouble getting up in the morning and say they go to school and then they're falling asleep in class. And so you want to make sure you put those notes down and say, well, why are they having trouble going to sleep? Is it because we're having some behavior issues? Is it because we're having some nighttime sensory issues? And that gives the teacher and the IEP team some more information as to how to better help the child in the classroom. And then attach your input to the IEP form. You could always do addendums to the IEP form. So, bottom line is use what you know from home and school history to describe what your child can do and where they need help. Your voice is going to be very essential to the progress because, as I said, other than the child's special education teacher, the parent is likely going to know the child best. And then also, we can use something called SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. These SMART goals are a way of evaluating and creating the blueprint to be followed. So, specific, as we just mentioned, be specific and write clearly defined IEP goals and objectives for what should happen. And then they need to be measurable, establish concrete criteria that can be measured. So, for example, we don't want to just say my child is going to be able to read 20 new words. We want to say they're going to be able to read 20 new sight words or 20 new nouns or 20 new adjectives by December 31st. And then make sure it's attainable. Each goal should be able to be reached. 20 sight words is good. We don't want to put them in a situation where they have 40 sight words and it's unattainable for them. We always want to make it where it can be attainable. You can build up 25 words, 30 words, 35, and so forth. And that goes along with being realistic. The goal may be attainable, but is it realistic? If it isn't realistic, it will never be attainable. So, for example, you can give your child 40 sight words. They may learn to read them, but it's not attainable if they don't know what they're reading, if they don't comprehend it. If a child is looking at words and they're quote, quote, reading them, but they don't comprehend them, they're not reading. They're just calling out words. So, like I said, it can be attainable, but is it realistic? Timely. What is the time frame for reaching the goal? Will the goal be reached by the end of the semester or by the end of the school year? And now we have our explanation of process. So we're building, progress. So we're building on our blocks here. In addition to formal meetings, you should also be in constant communication with your child's special education teacher about your child's progress. So this has to go with communication, how you want to communicate with them. And there's many different ways. And then what type of communication you want. What progress do you want? Do you want weekly grades? Do you want weekly behavior forms? What information that you think is going to be important to be updated on regularly? The instruments and methods used to measure progress must also be documented, and they also must show the results and data. And so this could be done through a meeting, a phone call, an email, documentation via backpack. I always tell parents, check your child's backpack because the teacher may have sent something home. But as the teacher, I always would send a hard copy in the backpack if I needed to tell the student something, and then I would send an email. So, for example, when we had to do our course performances and I needed them to wear a certain outfit, I would send it in the email, but then I'd send it in the backpack as well too. Also, keep in mind the IEP is a legal document that must be implemented with fidelity, and you have the right to request evidence of implementation. The IEP is reviewed frequently for progress and must be reviewed at least once a year to determine if the program is meeting your child's needs. After the initial IEP meeting, you will meet with your child's IEP team on an annual basis to review your child's progress and modify the plan as needed. As we said, this is revolving. We're constantly making changes and making it better. You can also request an IEP meeting at any time throughout the school year if you feel there is an issue that must be resolved by the IEP team. You will attend an IEP meeting every year until he or she graduates or stops receiving special education. And it's very imperative that you attend these meetings. There is a resource called www.rightslaw.com. This is where you can read about the IDEA law in more layman's terms, and I will make sure that I get that information to you in the chat, as well as some additional IEP resources. Description of services. What services these are going to be: specialized instruction, related services, supplemental services. So these services might be outside of the classroom. It might be ABA therapy, physical therapy. It might be cognitive psychotherapy. So these needs represent each skill area that is affected by the disability. So you're going to make sure that you have this information that is clearly written in the IEP to make sure that we understand the description of the services that they're going to get. And then we have our placement and the least restrictive environment. So we start at fully included. This is where our mainstream students are. This is where we hopefully will get our child to at one point. And so fully included is going to be the first most least restrictive environment. And so this is where the child is receiving general education services within their classroom with their peers, possibly maybe a co-support teacher or accommodations or related services. Then we move to number two, a pullout or part-time. The student spends most of their time in the general education classroom, but receives specialized instruction in other settings. For example, a resource room or therapy room for specific needs. Then we move to the tier three, which is our ESC class full time. The student receives instruction in a self contained ESC classroom throughout the day, typically for more significant learning needs. And so, with this is where I would see my ESC students for special area. They would be in their full time ESC class, and then they would come to special area for 30 minutes each day of the week. And then we go to a little bit more restrictive. These are the ones where we want to try to stay away from if at all possible. But we do understand that every situation is needed. We have ESC or alternative school, placed in a separate public school or program specifically designed for students with more complex needs that cannot be met in a regular school setting. And then we have our hospital or homebound. Instruction is delivered at home or in a hospital setting for students with medical needs that prevent them from attending school in person. Unfortunately, some of our little ones have severe medical disabilities and they are not able to attend school in that environment. And so they may have that hospital or homebound instruction. And then finally, our most restrictive is our residential school, the most restrictive setting where students live and receive educational services on site due to the intensive educational or therapeutic needs. Some additional notes is the location of the services can be in the classroom, resource room, therapy room, library, or other spaces. We want to make sure we're specific. Where is my child receiving their occupational therapy or their speech therapy? How much time? Is it going to be 30 minutes a week or 30 minutes 3 times a week? And then the team must always consider the least restrictive environment first and provide justification for why a more restrictive setting is selected. And so let's move back to accommodations and modifications. As I mentioned, some students with disabilities need accommodations or modifications to their educational program in order to participate in the general education and be successful in school. Sometimes our little ones don't need to be in a full ESC classroom. Maybe they just need a couple of accommodations. Maybe they just need a little bit more time taking their test, or they need to do their work on the computer instead of having to write it out because maybe they have some issues with their hands and kinesthetic use. While the Individual Disabilities Education Act and its regulations do not define accommodations or modifications, there is some agreement as to what they mean. An accommodation, as used in the document, allows students to complete the same assignment or test as other students, but with a change in timing, formatting, setting, scheduling, response, or presentation. So back to my drawing blood. The accommodation was made for me. I was able to complete the same job, which is drawing blood, as my coworkers, but we had a change in the formatting, how I was actually going to draw the blood. This accommodation does not alter in any significant way what the test or assignment measures. Examples of accommodation include a student who is blind taking a braille version of a test or a student taking a test alone in a quiet room. So the child is going to receive the same Florida Comprehensive Exam. However, they may need to do it in a different space. And then a modification. This is where we have the change. So a modification is used in the IEP as an adjustment to an assignment or test that changes the standard of what the test or assignment is supposed to measure. So when I taught ESOL, I would have to do this because I taught ESOL during the summer. My students came from other countries, but they sent them in a chunk of ages. So like, I think I had ages 12 to 18. They were all in the classroom with me. So I first had to use differentiated instruction, and then I had to figure out my students' language levels. And I did have to do an actual modification for my youngest student. When it came to the final exam, I had to do a completely different change an exam to give him because his language level was not at the level of, say, my 16 or 17-year-olds. Examples of possible modifications include student completing work on part of a standard or student completing an alternate assignment that is more easily achievable than the standard assignment. Needed modifications and accommodations should be written into the student's individualized education program or Section 504 plan. This is very crucial because when we get to testing time and there's accommodations and modifications, those accommodations and modifications may be the key to whether or not your child exceeds those measurable goals that we set for them at the beginning of the year. These changes should be chosen to fit the student's individual needs. It's important to include the student, if appropriate, when discussing needed accommodations and modifications. Asking the student what will be helpful is a good first step. And so we also have some resources I'm going to share with you on ways in which you can request those accommodations and modifications. And then 7 is our amount and duration. What is the service? Who, where, when, how many, how often, how much time. So our W, W, and H, W, 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 and our H. So I like doing that activity when I teach students. We do the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And so the IEP must be detailed for every service delivered to your child. It must be easy for anyone to read and is understandable. It must contain the who, what, when, where, why, and how for each service provided to your child. So, as I said, the IEPs can get lengthy, but it's going to be important to have those details. Special factors. Students with disabilities have unique needs. So, related services like transportation, counseling, or assistive technology must be individualized. These services are not a one size fits all and are not based solely on a specific disability. When we have special factors included in the IEP, we can come back and refer to it if we ever have an issue. Let's say, for example, with transportation, your child is being transported from one county to another or one school to another based on your living because the child cannot receive the services that they need at that particular school. That has to be documented in the IEP. And so there's no questions about what should be happening. Every IEP must include the child's special education services, any related services, and when where the service will be provided. So, some special factors, you may have a situation with behavior. Does the student's behavior affect learning? If yet, yes, the supports must be provided. I can think of situations where I had students, their behavior had to be included in their IEP because their behavior was at a disturbing level that unfortunately they couldn't come to the music class because it was too disturbing for the classroom. Well, that had to be included in the IEP that they are not getting the least restrictive environment when it comes to going to special area. English language learner. You may have an ESOL student who is also receiving special needs. Braille or visually impaired, communication needs. Support is needed if the student struggles to understand or express themselves. We need to make sure that they have the tools that they can use to express themselves. Maybe they need some type of assistive technology or communication device. And then deaf or hard of hearing. Communication methods like sign language or interpreters may be needed. And then now let's touch on our move transition. So our move transition is exciting because they're going to their next stage. This starts at age 12 to 14 when the student is in seventh grade or whichever comes first. And so this is kind of getting your child an idea of what they might want to do in their future and what type of diploma they are going to be striving for. And so I'm going to take you to a website called imdetermined.org. And this is a nice website that you can use for self-determination. And this is just an article, an article video here that it just talks about moving forward in the student involvement and how the IEPs have changed the education system. But this website here is going to give you tools. If I click on the tools, you can do a search and a filter. Let's say college and career. We've got a few things here. Using the employment transition guide to plan your career path, transition guide to independent living. So information like this is going to be important when we get to the move transition. And there's several other websites as well that you can look at, and you can also, of course, reach out to me as well. So let me take you back to our presentation. And let us wrap up with extended school year. So, extended school year sometimes may be important and necessary for the child because we don't want to have to struggle with regression. That's going to be very important. Even our mainstream students, we can tell that just the few short 3 months they're out of school, if they don't do any reading or writing or mathematics, then we see a little bit of regression. Oh, I got to remember those multiplication tables. When I get to double digits, I don't remember. I knew it in May, but I don't know it in September. So it is required that the IEP include a statement of whether or not extended school year services are needed. ESY is a decision made by the IEP team to educate a child beyond the typical school year at no cost to the parents. Eligibility for ESY should be determined by the IEP team on an individual basis. Not every child needs extended school year, and it does not mean summer school. When determining a student's eligibility for extended school year services, the IEP team considers several key factors to assess whether the student requires continued instruction to maintain progress on the IEP goals during breaks in the school year. So they have their IEP measurable goals that we plan for the year. We don't want them to regress. So they may need ESY. So regression, whether the student reverts to a lower level of functioning as evidenced by measurable decreases in skills or behaviors that occur as a result of interruption in educational programming. Recoupment, whether the student has the capacity to recover the skills or behavior patterns in which regression levels could occur. So if our child has a strong capacity to not be able to recoup, ESY may be necessary. Mastery, to the extent to which a student has mastered or consolidated an important skill or behavior. Self-sufficiency and independence, to the extent to which a skill or behavior is particularly crucial for the student to meet the IEP goals. Successive interruptions, the extent to which successive interruptions in educational programming result in the student's withdrawal from the learning process. We know that with some disabilities, students have to have a structure. And when they get off that structure, it's going to be very upsetting for them. And it's also going to possibly cause regression. And then severity of the disability, whether the student's disability is severe, such as autism or pervasive developmental disorder, serious emotional disturbance, severe intellectual disabilities, degenerative impairments and mental involvement, and severe multiple disabilities. So, some tips to succeed in your IEP meetings. Of course, build relationships. As I showed you at the beginning of the presentation, this is a visual showing that we work together. So, you want to build relationships with all those who are going to be involved with your students' IEP and education program. Sometimes you may be with them from pre-K, kindergarten, all the way up until post-graduation. They may be at the same school. So, you want to have a good relationship. You may want to join the PTA and get involved in different school advisories who can also get together with you and help you on your journey. Attend all meetings. If possible, attend all meetings. Try to attend with your partner if you have a partner. If not, you can request to record the meeting, or you can request to have it over the phone, or you can request to have it virtually. And as I said, the school is going to make multiple attempts to be able to get you to the IEP meeting. And so always work to be able to be at that meeting. Don't be afraid to say, well, this doesn't work for me, but I really want to be at this meeting. Can we make an adjustment? Signature. So our signature at the IEP meeting equals that we attended. An IEP can be long. Signing the IEP doesn't mean that you are in agreement with the information. It just means that you attended. If you don't agree, you can do a statement that says, I'm signing for my attendance, but I don't agree, and I want to have a further meeting. And remember, just because you don't agree doesn't mean we have to have conflict. It just means that there's a disagreement and we want to continue the conversation further. Organize your records. Keep a file, a folder, or a binder with all your students' updated information. A key word is updated information. If your child is at transition age 12, we really don't need IEP information from first grade. They've moved past that. We want to keep the most up to date. And usually I would tell parents, keep the grade before and then, of course, information for the grade coming up. And depending on the severity of the disability, you may need a couple of grades back. But again, it's all individualized. It's very important to make sure that you don't go attend your IEP meeting with all these papers. It's overwhelming for yourself and overwhelming for those who are there with you. And so, one of the things that we're going to share with you is an IEP organizer. Since this is a virtual meeting, we're going to get it to you either through email or through the snail mail that we use nowadays now. But this is a wonderful document where it helps you organize your child's IEP. You can get one each year. And then at the beginning of the document, it gives you some information to write about your child, to write about all the upcoming meetings that you have, organization for at school and for at home. And now, what to bring to the IEP meetings. Of course, the current IEP plan, progress reports, report cards, and a goal tracker, evaluations, any private evaluations that you want to share. Maybe you've been paying for some private evaluations yourself. Those are important as well to include. Your concerns, and your child's teacher will also bring their concerns. But you want to also share good things, your child's strengths. You want to share the things that they're doing well with because that can help you as you're writing the IEP as well. Your concerns, how your child feels about school. You're writing the IEP for your child. So you want to know how they feel about school, how they feel about being in the environment that they're in. If they have the ability to express these things to you, we want to know those things as well. Communication and planning tools. You want to have a calendar. You want to have your list of meetings that you want to have. You want to have your schedule, a list of questions you want to ask, proposed accommodations. We may need an accommodation, notes for what strategies are working or are not working. And then you want to have organization and comfort, a notepad, your IEP binder, a folder, a school contact sheet. You may even want to bring a bottle of water, or you may want to bring a snack or some tissues. And then you want to be an environment that is conducive and comfortable to everybody. So likely this will be at a school, but let's say if you have an issue where you can't get to the meeting or it needs to be in another location, all those things can be discussed. You want to be in a situation where you feel comfortable having a meeting because sometimes IEP meetings can be long. And then you want to have your support and backup. The teachers will also have their support and backup as well. But again, we're working together as a team. But you can bring a partner, you can bring an advocate or a friend, but you always want to make sure you let the school know ahead of time who you're going to be bringing. It's not fair to put any surprises. And they, in turn, will let you know who is going to be attending as well. And if they don't, you can always ask who is going to be at the meeting. So you can prepare, let's say, enough copies for everyone of something. And then an audio recorder. And also, you want to make sure that if you want to do audio recording, you ask because we are a two-party state. Both parties have to know that they are being recorded in order for it to be legal. And also, too, you want to come with a good story about your child. I think that it's going to be very important for us to start on a positive base for a meeting, especially if the meeting may be a little bit long or it can be stressful. Talk about something your child has done well. You can start by saying, I'm so glad to be with you here today. I just want to share with you what my child did a couple of weeks ago or this morning. It shows that they are meeting some of their measurable goals, and that can help you on a positive note. So now we are finished with the portion of the IEP. And so let's talk about our F&D programs here at Family Network on Disabilities and what we do. So these are our programs housed under Family Network on Disabilities. That we have Pop-In, which is parents offering parents information and networking. And as you can see, it's right here at the top in the panhandle. And then we have PSN, it's going to be on our southwest side down here, Parent Support Network. And then we have PEN, going to be on the southeast, Parent Education Network. We are all the same. We are all PTIs. We are all parent training coordinators. We deliver the same resources. We're just in a different area of the state. And then we have our Family Star program. The Family Star program has a different funding. They are funded by the Department of Health under Health Resources and Services Administration, and they assist families of children and youth with special healthcare needs to make informed decisions about healthcare for their children. So, as a parent training coordinator, I do have some medical knowledge, but I don't have as much as Lisa Math is our coordinator, as she knows. So, Miss Lisa would be somebody that's great for you to discuss if you're having some healthcare issues that you want to discuss and get some information about. And this is also very important. Inside F&D, we have our special needs trust. Our special needs trust provides a comprehensive special needs trust service. We include services as a trustee, a co-trustee, or trust administrator, and we handle all types of special needs trust. So this is something to think about for long term for your child. And then, of course, you can follow us on social media. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, TikTok, we have our website, and we also have YouTube. So Poppin, PSN, PIN, and Family Star, we all have our own separate Facebook page. We share the same information, but again, it's based on your area. So with Poppin, you're going to see our content, but you'll also see, for example, resource fairs or family outings that are based for your area. And then if you go to PSN, you would see information that's based for that area. Maybe let's say you're going down south for a vacation and you want to do an activity that's disability friendly. You could look at Parent Support Network's Facebook page and see what they have. And then also at our website, I'm going to take you there in just a moment and share with you some information because this is where you can get started with us. But before I do that, we have our QR code here. So you have to, well, you don't see my QR code because I have my screen minimized, but you should see the black QR code. We would love for you to leave us a review. We're working really hard to get our Google reviews up because we want people to know that we are here. We've been here since 1985. So we've been here 40 years and we need to let more people know about it. So if you really enjoy this presentation and you want to see other families help, please leave a review. And throughout the year, we do some drawings. So if you leave a review, you might get a prize from us. So our main office is going to be in Clearwater, Florida. We just had our grand opening. It was a beautiful event where we had our trust members come and we did our ribbon cutting. And it's a beautiful building where our leaders are working. Our family, our parent training coordinators, we all work from home. Our managers work from home, but our president, our CEO, some of our trustees, they all work in the Clearwater office. So let's just say you wanted services and you knew nothing about where to start, but you knew of F&D. You could email us at at this email here, or you could call, and then based on your location, I would get a notification if you're in one of my 9 counties. Let's say you're in one of my coworkers' counties, you would get a notification there and so forth. So that is how we do it. So please tell your friends and family throughout the state of Florida if they have a child that has a disability and they need some services. And I think I forgot to mention, we are covering ages 0 to 26. 26 is our cutoff, but if your child is 27 and you need some adult services, we do have a way to get you some services and other agencies that help with getting services for adults. So now I want to take you to our website, and our website here at Family Network on Disabilities is fndusa.org. This is what's going to pop up right away. Talk to a real person, find a resource, find an event. And so here is where we offer many of our pieces of information. You can go and search as you see here, but then you can also look at our social stories and our sound bank. So I'm just going to click on our sound bank. Our sound bank is really awesome. We've got animal sounds, household sounds. We know our children who are on the spectrum, they sometimes have a difficulty with this particular sound. And so you may want to prepare them for a sound. And so you may enjoy that. Then we have our social stories. I always like to share the first day of school, or I believe it's going to school by myself. I like that. The school year has just started. Let's say your child is a little bit anxious and they're not really sure about what's going to happen. You can share a social story. So we are always updating our website. We're always updating our one pagers. We have downloadable resources as well. And these are colorful one pagers that we like to share with our families. Let's see here, our one pager resource for this. So this is going to give you information. Let's say you are brand new to special education. You can go and you can just download it, or you see the arrow here, you can send it to yourself. It is mobile friendly, so it gets smaller on your phone. and it's got these bright colors, and it gives you each step. And then it also gives you our information in which you can reach out to us. And I'm going to close that out. And that concludes us on our discussion of the IEP. And I'm going to open it up for questions. And I have some additional information that I'm going to send to you all through an email. It's some additional IEP information. As I mentioned, I only have so much that I can do with you one-on-one, but there are advocates out there that will go to IEP meetings with you and can do a little bit more. And I know a few people in which I'm going to give that information to you as well who are in Pensacola and the surrounding area. So I'll be sending that through the email as well as some other resources. But I hope that you enjoy the presentation, and I am going to unmute us and we will have some time to discuss. All right, so you should be able to unmute yourself, and there are just five of us in here, and six including myself, so you're welcome to jump in and ask a question if you have one.
Hi, Glenesha. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
It's just amazing. Um, I just had a quick question. I guess it may be fairly obvious, but it's just incredibly helpful for like step three of the IEP process. You mentioned documenting challenges, and that's, yeah, of course, I should document any challenge that he has, so that I know where he could, possibly have an accommodation. Would that would that be would examples of that be accommodation or challenges that um would it just be school? Like what should I look for as a kindergartner? I guess if he's just, or maybe there's just nothing really to look for, but just be aware and documenting. Or do you have any advice for what to be looked for as far as documenting challenges goes?
Yes. So as the parent, you want to document challenges you may see at home. This can be challenges with behavior. This can be challenges with learning. Something simple as understanding chores to do, or something as simple as understanding turning off the light. These are all things that could make you think maybe my child might be suffering with a disability. And so you want to make sure you document any and everything that seems strange to you, that doesn't sit right with you. And that's at home. If your child is in VPK, maybe talk to the teacher and say, are you noticing any behaviors or any issues with learning? Are they having a hard time with understanding information, a hard time with their critical thinking skills, little things like that? Or are you noticing issues with their walking or their writing, or issues with them looking you in the eye, anything like that? You want to write those things down, especially if you are at the beginning part of transition, because we have the older transition, but then we have the younger transition from VPK to kindergarten, and you want to get that information included. So I would just start writing down any pieces of information that is concerning to you, if that makes sense.
Super. That's exactly what I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Laura, just jump in. Laura has a lot more experience than I do. So if there's been pieces of information I've said incorrectly, she can definitely correct me and give some input also.
Yeah, I'm over the ESC pre-K program. So if your child is going into kindergarten, I can definitely help with any questions like that too. But if anything comes up, you know how to reach me. My email is in the chat.
Hmm. Awesome.
All right. Do we have some more questions? Okay. Um, Still think if you have any questions, but a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Um, there's an IEP, a couple of IEP books that are important, that I'm going to put in there, but I forgot this one website. It is called A Day in Our Shoes. Shoes. I believe that's it. A dayinourshoes.com. Yes. So this is an excellent website as well. and it is about IEPs and, of course, other special education resources. But I shared this as well in my last presentation. And so you can take down this, but I'm also going to put it in the chat and you can get resources. So, any other questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, if there are no questions, you can reach out to me as well. Let me see if I can change my background. There we go. And share it this way. So you should be able to see my QR code now. If you want to scan that QR code, that is going to take you straight to my Popple information. And a Popple is going to be a digital business card. We're beginning to use those nowadays in business, and it gets us connected. And so once I get your Popple request, then you will get a call from me. But you're also welcome to just shoot me an email. I put my phone number in the chat, but also my email is right here. And trying to do two things at once. Sometimes I can do it and sometimes I can't. So gmilner at fngfl.org. With my phone, you can text me or call me and I will get back to you. And so also remember, we have our social medias. You can search for those and you'll see more content because we have so much more information. But as we're partnering with Santa Rosa, Laura has invited me back to come and do more presentations. We have some great presentations on alternative dispute resolution, collaborative communication, beginning the journey of kindergarten. And so we have so many other great webinars and pieces of information that we can get out to you. And then, of course, you're going to get the IEP binder that we have for you as well, too. Laura, do you have anything else you want to share?
I do not. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it and learned some new information. And again, please go and leave that review. Let me know how I'm doing. As I said, I'm new to this side of special education, but I would love to have some other feedback so how I can improve. So I look forward to talking with you all. Have a good afternoon. Bye.